Hey, what's up? So it looks like we're playing 4 tables of 10NL on microgaming. John mentioned to me that you were maybe dropping a few buy-ins at your 20NL shot. So let's see if we can find any issues with your game. So we flop the nut flush draw with the ace queen. We go for check raise. That's fine. This guy looks short stacked. We should definitely be betting the turn for value here. We have 10 deuce against a 2.5x open. I mean, folding is probably the best play, but calling wouldn't be unreasonable. I would fold usually. Okay, you value bet the ace queen. That's fine. And he folds, no problem. Yep, king 4 standard folds. What we'll do is if anything interesting comes up, like any issues, then we'll make a note. We talk about it after the video. It's good to see you marking players. That's one thing that you should be doing. It's very important. At the very least, it can help you work out, when you should be open raising a little bit wider. If you see these weaker players still to act behind, you can obviously open raise wider. Pretty standard open with the king queen offsuit on table 4. When raising is completely fine. Oh yeah, you can fold the queen 7, not a problem. The queen 8's fold also. Alright, so you flop top pair with the redraw to the OESD. Should probably be value betting 2 streets, actually, in this case. Don't check or anything. Yeah, 30 cents is fine. You don't want to bet super big either. There are ways that we can be beat on this texture reasonably easily. We don't want to get blown off our OESD. Okay, so the turn comes to 7, and you should keep on betting, usually. Hopefully he doesn't donk bet. Usually pretty rough if he donk bets, but mostly if he checks, you should just fire again for about 55 cents. Don't check here, it's a mistake that many players make, but it's a very easy turn barrel here in this case. In fact, that's something that I'm just gonna write down. I have a document here which I'm just gonna write some notes down. So first thing, missing value / protection bets on the turn. So it's very important that we actually fire a second bet there. Obviously we don't want to bet too big because he could have a flush, it's possible, but it's better to bet, extract value and protect rather than give a free card. Now since he checks river, it's a pretty straightforward value bet on the river. Yeah, 55 cents is fine. It's not that likely he has 2 pair plus, he would have led the river, so you don't need to go so small here in this case. Like 55 is fine in this case. You're not quite getting the max value here. It's not that likely we're beaten. Having said that, if he check raises, we obviously fold, but you didn't extract max value there, and you gave a free river card, so it wasn't the best line. Nine eight offsuit. Some of these spots are close. They're obviously not part of a standard defending range, but I'm noticing you got a fish behind you in the small blind. You got this guy. Sometimes can be acceptable to limp behind. I think folding might be reasonable from cutoff though. But I'd be tempted to either ISO from the button or just limp behind. That would be reasonable as well. Probably limp behind is especially reasonable when the small blinds are short stack. So even though it's an unorthodox play, it should be considered sometimes when you're playing against weaker players. Queen Jack is a fine fold from MP. 6 tray, we just fold against the min raise. 4-3 of spades. We'll see. We might be able to defend. Shouldn't fold against a min raise or anything. Should nearly always defend this combo against small blind open. It gets folded around to us, that's fine. King 8, standard button open. Deuce 3 offsuit. Probably should fold. Definitely fold now. Yeah, and you're correct to fold the king 7 suited to a 3-bet, although you could think about 4-betting that combo just because he seems pretty aggro so far. I mean, you're given a green tag, so I guess he's a fish, but you only have 13 hands on him. He may turn out to be basically a bad aggressive reg rather than a complete fish. Obviously, like king x suited hand is pretty good for a 4-bet, but by the same token, it's not super important to 4-bet bluff aggressively at these limits. Okay, so we have a limper on table 4. You don't really need to raise out of position with this combo. It's just not that important, especially with like the 50 big blind stacks. it's not going to be super profitable to raise. It's weak enough where you can just check behind. If it was suited, you should probably ISO, but you know, this is probably unnecessary. It's not super bad either. You should probably value bet this flop with the ace-5 for small sizing. It's better than checking. Don't bet 65 though or something. It's not going to be the best play. If you look at the way the board texture is structured, there's just no real reason to bet super big in this case. I would just bet smaller and see if I can stretch it out over 3 streets or something against the weaker player. What you'll find is when you use this sizing on the flop, although you can still extract value, you sometimes create very difficult turn and river situations for yourself. Queen 10, you should lead the turn even though you don't have much, and you should fire the river as well. It's going to be the best play here in this case. Just as a population exploit, you can just double barrel most holdings and make profit. So that's fine, you should definitely lead the turn there. So I guess that's maybe another thing to think about as well. I'll just add that to the list, which is just, you know, bet sizing in general. You always want to think about whether you're having like a 2-street plan for the hand or a 3-street plan for the hand. And the problem with a hand like that ace-5 offsuit is it can get very tricky out of position on the turn and river if you bloat the pot too much, even against weaker players. It's better to bet smaller, try and keep the initiative for a bit longer. Queens, obviously ISO, probably to about 60 cents here. 45 is too small in this spot. Got 2 weaker players. It's just, you're not extracting enough value even with 50 cents. 60 cents, even 70 cents. You really want to build a pot here pre-flop. Okay, you know, probably one of the best flops, so we just c-bet. Try and get 3 streets, depends on the run out obviously. But yeah, pretty easy flop bet. I mean, in theory this is too large, but it's probably a good play against a weaker player to kind of bet kind of big with value hands. 10's pretty standard open. Queen 10. We should obviously bet the flop for protection. I'm just going to have to go back slightly in the video. Just bear with me 1 minute. Just so I can see the pre-flop action again. Okay, so we open raised. Yeah, I mean, mostly you should bet the Queen 10 hand. It's not that bad to check back, but the idea here is the hand is kind of vulnerable, could benefit from a bit of protection, nearly always the best hand. Don't want to give free cards to stuff like, you know, ace jack, ace queen, stuff like this, diamond draws, etc. Usually slightly better to bet. If it was rainbow, I'd probably check, so that should tell you that it's pretty close overall, but I'd usually be c-betting in this spot, just for thin value. Follow up with a small bet in the turn, check back the river. It's usually the best play. As played, we should obviously call a turn bet from our opponent, but exploitatively we should fold to a double barrel these limits. It's not that likely he double barrel bluffs aggressively enough, so I mean obviously don't fold the turn. And now I don't think you can fold this river, but it's, you know, it's going to be pretty close just because it's a diamond, complete some straight draws. So I'd look at his sizing as well. You know, if he pots it, then I mean you're in a break-even situation. I mean, it doesn't matter too much if you call or fold. I mean, it's going to be a call in theory, but there's just so many ways you beat that. It's not super mandatory you actually make that call. Again, if it was like a rainbow queen, you should always call, but you can have flush draws the way we've played the hand. So I slightly prefer a flop bet, but the hand was pretty reasonable overall. Jack deuce, don't raise hands like this, just check back. You don't need to just raise everything against small blind complete. Looked like you were thinking about it, but it's a pretty straightforward check back. Bet any 2 cards on the flop in this situation. Okay, so no need to check back with the jack deuce. Won't be the best play. Definitely bet the turn. Hopefully you bet the turn. We just gave him a free card. That's basically the short version of the story. Is you could have won the pot on the flop. You didn't. You gave him a free card. Now he can pick up, you know, 8x hands and stuff. So I guess could consider that like an auto profit situation usually. So I'll just take a note of that. Alright, so we open the jack 7, I think, which is fine, and obviously c-bet. Your hand's very vulnerable here, so don't check just because it's 3-way. Alright, so it's a pretty bad check. I guess it's going to come down to understanding when your hand needs protection. because, you know, statistically we probably have the best hand there when we flop a 7. So check folding is way too tight, basically. 5s you should ISO, so don't check behind the 5s. You're a huge equity advantage here with the 5s against this limping range. Well, I mean, maybe not huge, but you have a significant equity advantage. So some hands you should ISO, some you should check behind. 5s is a pretty straightforward raise in that spot. And you check back the flop, which is kind of bad. Check back the turn, which is bad. You're just giving like so much free equity with this line. Goodness knows what he has in the river when he overbets. I guess I fold and give him credit, but should be pretty. If you do just check back their pre-flop, then you should bet the flop for protection. You probably have the best hand. You 3-bet the king's pre-flop, bad flop. Checking back is the best play here. Probably should peel a turn bet unless he bets pot size or something. Then you can hear a fold. Now you want to start betting for value, but just bet quite small. Don't check again. You want to bet like 60, 70. Yeah, this looks good. I think you're sizing up. Oh no, you check. Okay. So close to being the best play. You thought about the best play, but you didn't make it. Definitely value bet the river now. Oh my goodness. Okay. Alright. I shouldn't react so badly when I see stuff like this, but it's pretty terrible. You have to value bet there. I mean, he never has an ace. Like, you always have the best hand with kings there, so I don't see why you wouldn't value bet. You have to value bet the river. Ace deuce, you have to c-bet this combo because, you know, statistically you have the best hand, so don't check back here or anything. You seem undecided with some of these decisions. Your cursor's like hovering between the two buttons, and I kind of wonder whether you have a high level of confidence regarding some of the plays you're making. It's almost like you click a button, but you're not really 100% sure whether that was the right play. Like some of these situations are straightforward, but your cursor, maybe I shouldn't read too much into your cursor, but it's hovering between two different buttons. Kind of suggests you don't really know what the best play is. Okay, 8-10 suited. This is a 3-bet pre-flop usually. We cold call the 5s. I think it was a cold call. So we should go for check raise, obviously. I usually make a bit larger than 3x with the 3 bets out position, so I'd probably make it 70 with the 10-8 suited. A6 of clubs, easy c-bet there with the back door. 5s was fine, by the way. He checked back, so we just lead the turn. Even though it's 4 to straight, we should still lead. Yeah, I don't get why you wouldn't c-bet this combo. I mean, with the A6. I'm just going to pause for a minute because there's quite a few things going on. He has 100% fold to c-bet so far. You've got the back doors. The only reason why you might consider a check back with the A6 of clubs is the stack size. But I think c-betting is still going to be the best play, just given the fact that we have ace high. And it's more important when we have ace high if we're playing against a shorter stack, because raw equity is a bit more important than playability on the later streets, because there won't be that much playability on the later streets anyway. But I think when you specifically have the ace high combo, and you probably have the best hand anyway, you should be betting. Of course it's a bluff, but you can get called by some worse hands as well, which is, you know, completely fine. 3-4 offsuit we should be min raising unless you don't want to play heads up. You don't want to play heads up, okay, that's fine. But, you know, just min raise any two heads up. And, you know, I do recommend playing heads up if that's, you know, allowed as part of your staking agreement, because you can get on better tables that way. Some of the things guys doing a heads up is ridiculous at the microgaming side, so can sometimes be plus EV to start tables ourselves. 6s we flop a set, so we're just going to go for 3 streets of value. Ace King, we're going to go for a 3-bet because it's a min raise. Even if we don't normally 3-bet against MP opens, we should probably against a min raise. So again, the sizing, I'd make it like 70 there. So just make it a bit bigger out of position. It's just a really standard thing to do. Without going into too much detail, it's to do with how we should be constructing our range in position and out of position. And generally, if we're constructing our ranges correctly out of position, it makes sense to go for a larger sizing. 6-4 is a fold against an MP3X. Ace-9, you want to... calling's fine, 3-betting's reasonable as well, but don't fold. Like, folding's not reasonable in this case. It's a min-raise, you have suited Ace-9. I don't know whether you're scared because you're short stack or whether that's your standard play. So I'm missing some defense versus min-raises. I'll add that to the list. So that was small blind versus button situation. Ace-Jack, good ISO. Ace-8, standard open. 3-8, standard check back on the flop here. No good reason to be c-betting. We don't have any backdoor equity. And you don't have any reads on the guy, so this is not going to be a good c-bet. You want to check back this combo and go for a delayed c-bet. So c-betting without equity, that's going to be another issue. The ace-jack, that is a hand where it's non-vulnerable enough that you don't need to bet for protection. So checking's reasonable, but now you need to go for value on the turn and probably the river as well. It's very unlikely he has a queen right now, which means that... Oh, we've checked back. Okay. I just want to like go back in the video a sec. Just look at this. I just want to watch your cursor closely. It's not something I do too much, but I just want to kind of guess at what's going through your head when you do this. So your ISO, that's standard. Now on the flop, I just want to watch your cursor closely. You just went straight to check, and you clicked it. You did think for a second. Now on the turn, you're thinking about checking, you put in a bet, you think about betting, then you click on check finally. So I'm kind of getting this general vibe from a lot of your decisions where, okay, you checked, but I don't think you have any confidence whether that's the best play or not. Whereas, you know, in truth, it should be like a really straightforward value bet on the turn. Like, you shouldn't have to think about it that much. You played this hand very similar to the other hand. I can't remember exactly what you had, but you value bet the river too small. You actually took the same line with the other hand. You missed value on the turn, then you went for a very small value bet on the river. You're missing a lot of value. You're given free cards here. Ace-3, this should be pretty standard overcall, the ace-3 of hearts. I mean, I guess you could squeeze if you really wanted to, but I would normally call. It's probably okay to actually check fold with the ace-3. So long as you don't check call, your options are to lead small or check fold. Like, check calling is not an option on the a6-5, so hopefully we don't see that happen too much. Normally we would lead the turn, but not on the jack of diamonds. I think we just still put this combo in our check folding range, mostly. Yeah, just check it down and hope your ace high is good. It's not going to be good that often. Someone's going to have, like, you know, pocket sevens with the 7 of diamonds or something, but I don't think you want to be bluffing either. Definitely can't value bet. Yeah, just check fold. I know it's a very small bet. I guess he's value betting some. He might be value betting like a 7 high flush or something. It's possible. Not that it's the best play, but it would seem to make sense that he might be doing that in these games. And this guy raises with the queen high, second nut flush. Nothing too much happening at the moment. Okay, King Deuce might be able to play this somehow. I see there's a poster in the pot, so he does have a full stack, but you know, usually the regs don't post, so I would sometimes put like a tag on that guy straight away, which I think is what you're going to do, which is the correct thing to do. Yeah, and his correct call against the min raise. You know, small blind's obviously a very fishy player as well. You could lead, or you can check fold. Now he min raises. I mean, the calling's fine, I guess. I don't have a big problem with calling. Maybe get the roughly the right pot odds. I would just peel again, usually. I just give up on the river. If he checks, I would just check back probably. It's close on the river. I think it's a fold, but you know, he could have some stuff like 6-7 or something. But yeah, folding's good. 10-8 is an ISO. That's fine. Ace-3 is a complete, so don't ISO raise his hand, don't fold it, it's a complete. It's like the best play. You cannot fold stuff like that. I'll explain why a bit later. This guy overcalls and leads out on the 7-7 deuce. This should probably be a fold despite having the back doors. The paired board doesn't help us that much. Okay, 6 is standard call, Jack 4 is a fold. Okay, so if this guy skips a c-bet with the 6s, it's very important that we bet. If he c-bets half pot or so, we can usually Pwll 1. I mean, folding's probably slightly too tight in reality. But, you know, it's not like a train wreck or anything. It's just like really tight poker, that's all. You can still beat this limit playing like that. And, you know, you make your decisions on the turn and river a little bit easier, but I don't think it's a theoretically correct fold in that scenario. But, you know, I think that's not one of your bigger problems. Ace-Jack, standard open. King 10, should be able to defend this somehow. 3 battle calls fine with the King 10. Either option's reasonable. Okay, not too many people know this, but if this guy c-bets, we should be raising the flop. It's kind of value / protection, because, you know, there are a bunch of draws out there, etc. It usually works out better if we raise the flop ourselves, take the initiative, extract some thin value. You know, it's a bit of a weird situation with the Ace-Jack. I mean, you can find an argument for doing anything here. You can raise, you can fold, you can call. I'm not too worried about that spot. Queen 9, I think it's standard 3-bet from the small blind against the button open. And again, I don't make it 90, I make it €1. There's small things, I don't think it's going to matter that much if you make it 90 cents, but normally just make it a little bit bigger out of position. You can make it 90 in position and then make it, or even 80 in position, and then make it like a euro out of position. (10-6). Yeah, I mean that's a little bit of a close one. I mean, normally it's a fold, but he is min-raising. He's folding to 3-bet somewhat. I mean, again, I'm not gonna make a big issue out of the fold with the 10-6. It's probably fine in all reality. The blinds are 3-betting a bit as well, so folding's probably best. I think this was a limp pot with the Queen 8. You check folding's fine. If he checks back, we should just lead every turn. Just lead the turn with the Queen 8. It's going to be the best play. Jack 9, I think check fold. I kind of have a feeling that, I mean, okay, you didn't see that, which is good, actually. You should now double barrel with the 9 Jack. With the Queen 8, I mean, you've got some showdown value with Queen 8 high, but you probably would have had a higher EV if you just bet the turn with the Queen 8. With the Jack 9, we have to fire turn and river. That's like the only good play here. You must fire the river here. Otherwise you're going to lose to stuff like, you know, King High Club Draw or something that's busted. So I'm missing some river bluffs. Again, I mean, there are worse things at low limit microgaming than missing river bluffs. But it would have been a correct bluff there to fire the river with that combo. Queen King, pretty standard open on table 4 from UTG. 10-5, standard fold from the cutoff. I mean, it does depend how bad the big blind is, of course, but mostly it's a fold. You know, c-betting's fine with the Queen King. It's actually okay to check this combo some of the time as well on the flop. You know, we don't have 3 streets, but betting probably the best in these games. Again, I kind of wonder what you're attempting to achieve with your bet sizing there, especially on the turn. I can see a bunch of river situations that are going to give you a big headache. Unless you think this guy's a calling station, you can just bomb river. Okay, now it's an easy fold. I think you've kind of overextended yourself there with your bet sizing. You know, some hands should bet like that. You know, if you have top set or something, then you should play like that. Or if you have a set, or you have ace king, you should bet like that. Queen king, you know, the worse your kicker gets, the less likely it is that you should just be bombing flop and turn, basically. It's something you have to think about. You don't just want to be using the same bet sizing. At least not exploitatively, anyway. 8-5, I would defend against. Well, you have to overcall the 8-5 now. The odds are too good. You could lead the flop, or you can check fold. Those are your two options here. Okay, if you check, it's a check fold, so just keep that in mind. Don't check call or anything. That's terrible. But you can use a hand as a semi-bluff / protection by just leading. That's reasonable as well. You do check fold, which is good. King 10 should be able to defend this somehow. Yeah, calling's fine with the King 10. 3-betting's fine as well. Probably calling is the correct play. Like, I don't think it's a terrible 3-bet or anything. I think it's just not quite the right play for this hand, but it's certainly reasonable. Ace-Jack is a 3-bet, however. Oh, you actually squeezed the King 10. I didn't notice that. I'd probably overcall. Definitely check this flop with the King 10. You have like 1 or 2 streets of value max, so you may as well start out by checking. The board's reasonably dry. You're gonna run into problems if you c-bet with the King 10 here. Not that it's minus EV to c-bet, it's still plus EV, and like, I think the sizing is horrible with King 10 if you're gonna c-bet. It's so easy to either just get a bunch of folds or for the hand to go horribly wrong on the later streets. It's not quite correct post-flop planning for the hand. I don't get the impression that you're thinking about what may happen on the turn and river in some of these spots and constructing a plan accordingly. Jack 4, probably a fold. Ace Queen should be playable. 6-8, probably a fold, especially against a cutoff open. Okay, flop top pair. So now this is a hand where you can bet, you know, reasonably big. This is fine. We have position. If things get out of control, we can just check back the river, and you just check back the flop, which is a train wreck. This is not the right type of combo to be protecting your checking back range with. You do it with something like Queen Jack, for example. There's no way you would ever check back Ace Queen on the flop here. Value bet the river, please value bet the river. Do not check this river. Yes. Oh, you've been distracted by the Jack 9. Okay, now you've decided to check. Okay, alright. Again, I get the strong feeling of indecision. I don't know whether you just got distracted by the Jack 9 and decided to check and forgot that you were going to bet, or whether you just put in the bet with no intention of betting, or you put in the bet then decided against it. I don't know, but you're indecided in what I would consider very clear spots in some cases. Let's just have a look at this Jack 9. I'm just going to rewind slightly. I want to see if we've taken the best line here with the Jack 9. So we open raise pre-flop. Now this is a combo where we don't have to c-bet the flop. Checking is fine. It may even be strong enough to check call, although it's always a little bit dicey to do that at these limits in multi-way pots. But so now the turn, when player 3 does not lead out the turn, it's very unlikely we don't have the best hand right now. We're going to lose to some combos of 10 Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack. You know, that's going to happen. But we definitely don't want to give a free card in this turn. There's no good reason to give a free river right now. Since, you know, statistically we're going to be good here the majority of the time. So best play is to put out a small protection bet, like 1/3 pot or something. But we definitely don't want to give a free river here. This is a pretty bad check. River is now a thin value bet, I would imagine. well, like 1/3 pot or something. Not half though. 1/3's good. You know, if you think about the hands we're trying to get calls from, you know, things like pocket eights, you don't want to bet 50 here usually. Although they still might call, and I doubt you're ever beaten, so it's still going to be a plus EV river bet. It's probably just not max EV because you're not really extracting a value effectively with that sizing. Standard folds on all tables at the moment. Queen King, standard open. Uh, 3-4 is a fold from the small blind against the min raise. This guy min 3 bets on table 1, so never fold against min 3 bets. Don't 4-bet either in most cases, so this is just pretty straightforward call. This guy has re-raised those, so now we fold the Queen King. On table 1, that guy's got a very high 3-bet stat, 15.4, but it's probably because he's min 3-betting a lot, I would imagine. He's not. So, you know, if that guy comes out with a big 3-bet, we want to be careful we don't just look at his 3-bet stat and say, hey, this guy's crazy. You know, he might only 3-bet aces for a regular sizing, for example, and just min 3-bet everything else. This is one of, like, the pitfalls of using a HUD, is, okay, we know he's 3-betting aggressively, but the stat doesn't tell us what his standard sizings are. He might not 3-bet aggressively for a regular sizing at all. He just likes to min 3-bet a lot. Deuces is a call in the big blind. 10-9 of diamonds, standard open. And I think you can just check fold this flop. You have enough better hands in your range that you don't need to defend twos. So just standard check fold. We flop the combo draw on table 3. This guy's folding to c-bet so far. Pretty straightforward c-bet here. Don't bet so big though. This is reasonable. You don't have to bet big on the flop here because we're going to barrel any turn anyway. So on this turn card we bet about 80 cents and then we check back the river, but don't check back the turn. That's not the correct play. This is too big. Too big. Yeah, it's too big. You have to really think about what you're trying to achieve with these bets. You're not bluffing there. You're going for thin value with a 10x, no kicker. So, you know, bombing 2/3 pot is not going to be the right bet sizing there. Should be a smallish bet, like half pot. King 3, you should King 2, you should bluff the river here. Again, I guess not too many people know this, but it's a pretty straightforward river bluff. As a rough guide, if the pot gets checked down 3-way, then you should just bluff any river, because people don't usually have too much stuff. It's only a small thing, but it adds up in the long run. I probably wouldn't fold 9-7 here because button's a fish, UTG's a fish. I would just tag along for the ride, see if I can flop a straight. I think that could end up being a very profitable spot, actually, like way more profitable than it should be in theory, just because there's 2 donks in the hand. Okay, looks like the video's over. So let's just review a few things. Yeah, I mean, the general idea is that you're playing okay. But, you know, there's a lot of fine-tuning you can do to your game, I would imagine. So let's just recap. Now, I don't remember, you know, I haven't written this. I've written it quite quickly, so some of the stuff might not make sense. And I don't always remember which specific hands these are going to pertain to. Number 1, missing value protection bets on the turn. This is just happening throughout the entire session. It's only half an hour session, but there are a bunch of spots where you should have bet the turn for value and you didn't. So one of these was a hand near the beginning where you actually had top pair. I think you had king queen on a 10 jack queen, and the turn completes the flush and brings a diamond, which is obviously a scary card. There is a chance that our opponent could have a flush. However, there's a bunch of other stuff that you can have in his range which are worse. You know, you can have things like Jack X, 10X, King Jack, King 10 with the draw as well, stuff like this. You could have Ace Jack with the Ace of Diamonds draw, you know, the flush draw. I don't remember the exact cards on the board, so you know some of these hands might not be possible. But the general idea is if you have a value hand on the flop and the turn completes the flush card, the best play is to fire again. If you're worried that your opponent has a flush, then just reduce your sizing, but don't give a free card. Checking is pretty bad for a whole bunch of reasons. Number 1, if your opponent has any one card of the available flush draw, he's free rolling 20% equity across turn and river. That's going to add up in the long run. Not so good. The other bad thing that can happen is maybe opponent didn't really have anything. He was floating the flop wide, and now you're giving him the perfect opportunity to bluff the river in a situation where we're kind of uncomfortable with our hand anyway. We signal to our opponent that we have a capped range when we check back the flush completed turn. He can lead the river very effectively in that spot. It's very tough for us to call, even with hands as strong as top pair, good kicker. So a whole bunch of bad things can happen if we don't double barrel on those turn cards. Okay, point number 2, bet sizing in general. I just kind of get the feeling you haven't spent a lot of time working on bet sizing, although there were a number of spots where you did actually go for an unorthodox sizing. Specifically on the river, there were 2 spots where you went for an underbet, which shows you're thinking about bet sizing on some level, which is good. It just so happens that those were spots where you probably had more value, so the underbet sizing wasn't the best. Just something to keep in mind in general as well, in terms of in-position and out-of-position play. We saw a hand with the ace-queen where you flop top pair, top kicker, in position where there's a flush draw available, and you check back the flop. Okay, firstly, this doesn't make sense because, it's way too strong to be using to protect your checking back range in the majority of cases. Besides, we'd only ever do that if our opponent was playing hyper-aggressively on the turn and river anyway with overbets, and that's not going to happen at microgaming. So, I guess one general principle is don't slow play stuff. Now, if there is ever any hand that we can slow play, it's specifically going to be stuff like top pair, weak kicker, out of position. Because in these kind of spots, number 1, we don't risk that much by giving a free card, and number 2, the hand is not going to play so well in the later streets, especially if we decide to bomb the flop and turn. So let's say we open raise out of position, let's say from the small blind, big blind calls, we flop something like a weak top pair on a non-vulnerable board, and we bomb the flop and turn. The river's going to get very, very awkward. In fact, even the turn can potentially get awkward if the turn card comes bad and we have to check. Now this is fine in position. If we flop a weak top pair in position and we want to bomb, flop and turn and then check back the river, that's fine because the bad card comes on the river, we just check back, we get to see our showdown. So, that's not a problem. But out of position, there's 2 things we can do to combat this situation. Number 1, if we flop a weak top pair, then we can bet smaller, we can reduce our sizing. We can maybe even bet small enough where we can still extract 3 streets of value, even with top pair hands that don't have a good kicker. The other thing we can do is we can start out by checking some of our range. So we saw the hand where you 3-bet squeeze king 10 suited, and then you flop a king high texture, so you have a non-vulnerable weak top pair, and you bet a very big sizing on the flop. And this is very, very problematic because, number 1, you can't keep betting such large sizings on the turn and river. You're forced to check. If your opponent starts betting against you, then you kind of have just a bluff catcher. You probably end up check folding. And, the sizing as well, you're kind of really bloating the pot, complicating that difficult situation on the later streets. So again, you have 2 options. You can either start out by checking. If the opponent checks back, that's fine. You can play a 2-street hand instead, which is kind of what we want to do with top pair, weak kicker. Or we can reduce our sizing. Like, we can start betting stuff like 30-40% pot and try and retain the initiative for as long as possible. Now, these are the kind of things that will come to you if you think about the later streets. So, you should never just look at the flop in isolation and say, hey, I flopped top pair, I'm going to bet now. You should always think to yourself, if I bet here, what possible things could happen on the turn and river? And start making a plan for the entire hand. When you start to do this, then you'll begin to realize that, flopping top pair, weak kicker out of position and then bombing the flop is not the smartest play from a turn and river point of view. You'll make money on the flop, and then you'll have ridiculous decisions later in the hand. Okay, so you're missing a few automatic profit spots. That's number 3 as well. For example, we're in the big blind, small blind completes. We check back the big blind because we have some garbage hand like Jack Deuce, for example. I think you had Jack X or something. Opponent checks the flop. He doesn't, bet. You should just fire every time there. Similar situation is, let's say button limps. We're in the big blind. We check the flop, which is fine. He checks back. We should just fire every turn. These are just spots where we can make automatic profit with any 2 cards. So you're missing a few easy spots. Another auto profit spot actually was that King X hand we had on the river. If the 3-way pot gets checked down to the river, we should just always bluff in those situations. Okay, understanding when hand needs protection. There's a whole bunch of situations where you're just giving free cards in this session, which is going to add up in the long run. Even if it's not minus EV overall, it's not max EV to do that. So one example was we opened Jack 7 offsuit from the cutoff, or Jack 7 suited from the cutoff. Button called, someone overcalls in the blinds. Flop texture something like 8-7 deuce, either rainbow or two-tone, I'm not sure, maybe it was rainbow. And that's a hand where, statistically, we probably have the best hand because we flopped a pair, but it's not strong enough to check call, And assuming no one bets and he gets checked around, we're just giving free cards to our opponent's overcards, and they're going to have a lot of them. So it's better to just bet the hand for protection. If we take the pot down, that's fine. If we get called, we're probably not doing super well against their calling range, but at least we have 5 outs to make 2 pair of trips. It's going to happen 20% of the time by the river. So understanding when a hand needs protection and when it doesn't. So another example was a small blind opened, I think, and then we defend in the big blind with Queen 10 suited, and the board texture comes King 10 deuce or something similar with a flush draw. Now, admittedly, it's a close spot, and I did mention that I would actually check back if it was a rainbow board, but it's just about vulnerable enough where you should be c-betting for protection. So understanding when you should protect your hand and not give free equity. ISO raises, you were deliberating ISO raising jack high at one point, whereas it seemed like you checked back pocket fives pretty quickly, big blind versus small blind. Pocket pairs are good hands to ISO raise big blind versus small blind, because they just have very, very good raw equity. In fact, they have such good raw equity that we can c-bet any flop, basically, against the vast majority of opponents, because if they fold a lot, then it's easy to see why it's plus EV to c-bet every time. If they don't fold a lot, that's fine as well, because statistically we're going to have the best hand a lot when we have something like a pocket pair pre-flop. Even on most flop textures, we're still going to be good. Good enough that even if our opponent is a calling station, he's still not making money against us because we just have pairs a lot of the time, which are going to beat some of his calling range. So there's absolutely no good reason not to ISO raise something like fives, BB versus small blind open. Missing some pre-flop defense. In particular, I'm referring to the ace-9 of diamonds hand where button min raises and we're in the small blind with ace-9 of diamonds. I'm not sure if maybe you got put off by the effective stack sizes in that hand because, you know, 1 or 2 of the guys were short, but there's rarely going to be an excuse for folding something like ace-9 suited to a min raise, even if we're in the small blind. So that should have either been 3-bet or called. Either option would have been fine. Yeah, missing some defense versus min raises, small blind versus button. 7, c-betting without equity. So there's a hand like, I think you had 8, 3 of hearts or something, and you just completely missed the flop, I think. You just fired a c-bet anyway. You've got no reads on the guy. You've got like 7 hands on the HUD. You don't want to just fire random c-bets. I'm not sure if maybe someone's told you in the past you should c-bet board textures just because they're dry. But, you know, some advice is not good advice, even if it's popular advice. Basically, you shouldn't be c-betting the flop without some kind of equity. Because even if it might just about be plus EV in some cases against the right opponent, it's not necessarily max EV. Usually best players to check back the flop and go for a delayed c-bet with those combos. So don't just fire random c-bets with no equity. Missing value on the turn with delayed c-bets. Now I don't remember the exact... Actually, there may not have been delayed c-bets as such. It may have been, for example, a situation where you were the cold caller pre-flop and you flopped a non-vulnerable made hand and then checked back the flop, which is fine. Then opponent checks again on the turn, and we should be going for value on the turn and river. This happened at least twice during the session. And in both hands, you check back the turn after some deliberation and then bet small on the river. Whereas actually what you should have been doing is betting for value on both turn and river in some of those cases. I think maybe you had like ace-jack and one of them like queen x and the other one. I could be completely wrong, but you're missing value basically by not, you have to identify situations where, okay, you don't have like a super good hand in the absolute sense. You have something like second pair top kicker. However, your opponent never has you beat, because if he did, he would have played the hand in a different way. So what that means is we can be in spots where we have second pair top kicker, but we actually just have the effective nuts. And that means we should be value betting rather than checking back again. So at least 2 spots there where you miss significant value with the way that you played the hand on the turn. You didn't bet, and then when it got to the river and opponent checked again, you then made a really small bet when the correct option is to go for a larger bet just because you never beat in that situation. Ace-X, okay, so this was the hand where one of the players open limped, I think another one limped behind, something like this. We're in the small blind with Ace-X offsuit, maybe it was Ace-3 offsuit, and we just folded. Can't be doing stuff like that. Number 1, just in terms of equity, we have a ridiculous amount of equity to complete. And number 2, we're in a hand with 2 fish. At least 2 fish. Maybe the big blind was a fish as well, I'm not sure. And this is where we're going to make most of our money playing somewhere like microgaming. We're not going to make it from battling the regs. I mean, if we're good, we might make some money from the regs. But most of our money is always going to come from the recreational players. What that means is we need to go out of our way to get involved in as many pots as we possibly can against the weaker players. So, there's kind of like a whole mentality issue there. I mean, it's good that you're marking the fish. That's a great start. And it may be that in this particular case, maybe no one's told you that it's okay to complete in the small blind. Maybe people have told you, oh, you should either be raising or you should be folding pre-flop. Maybe that's partly the issue. So you didn't feel it was strong enough to raise, and I agree, it wasn't strong enough to raise. so therefore you should fold, but you're missing an important option in the middle, which is completing, seeing a really cheap flop, trying to flop 2 power trips or something, and then stacking the weaker player who's just going to pay you off way too much. So you have to understand when it's correct to complete in the small blind. This is an important tactic for playing as many hands as possible against the weaker players. So some of the rules that you've been taught go out of the window when you're playing against recreational players. Number 10, missing some river bluffs. Okay, we mentioned this, that there was a hand with the Jack-9 where you didn't c-bet the flop, which was correct. And I kind of thought maybe you would c-bet the flop because I'd seen you c-bet without equity, but you did check, which was correct. You turn the OESD on the completed flush turn card, you fire the turn, river's blankish, and then you just check the river with Jack high, which is not going to be theoretically correct. I don't think it's going to be a big problem if you don't, if you miss these river bluffs. It's not going to be the difference between winning or losing or anything, but you did have a profitable river bluff in that hand, and you shouldn't be too scared about the fact that the guy has a flush or something, because if he had a flush, he would have bet the flop in the hand. You'll see if you go back and have a look at the Jack-9, there's kind of no way you can really have a flush. It's sort of unlucky. So double barreling is usually going to be the best play, especially when we have Jack high, no showdown value. So thinking about when to bluff the river, I wouldn't say that is the biggest problem though. So biggest problem, I would say understanding when to protect your hand and bet sizing. Now bet sizing, everyone has bet sizing leaks because it's, it's just one of the hardest areas of No Limit Hold'em. So, don't feel bad about this one because most people don't know what bet sizing to use in a whole range of different spots. But understanding the importance of protection, I would say this is something that you really need to think about. When is it not correct to give free cards when you have a made hand? So just keep in mind that even if people have told you in the past that the only reason for betting is either for value or as a bluff, this is a complete oversimplification of the way that poker works. Sometimes we bet in spots where the main benefit is that we actually fall out a bunch of worse hands. And even in bluff spots, sometimes we'll find a good bluff spot, but one of the things that makes that bluff spot so profitable is that we can occasionally get caught by worse hands. This is something to keep in mind. Now, it may not make sense immediately, but just understand that the reasons for betting are not as simple as saying, hey, do we have a value bet here? Do we have a bluff? Oh, okay, if we don't, then it must be a check. Betting in poker is a lot more nuanced than this, and there are situations where you probably have the best hand, and you should bet hoping your opponent folds. So this is what's going on at the moment, is you're not picking up on these spots. It might be partly to do with the way you've been taught how to play poker, but the essential idea here is don't give people free equity unless it's necessary. If you're in a spot where you have probably what's likely the best hand, you don't feel you can extract value, but giving free cards would be dangerous, it's usually a good idea just to go for a small bet and not give that free card on the next street. Okay, so if you have any questions, this is my Skype. Type it on the screen. It's Weasel with a small W. I'm not sure why my caps lock key's on it. There we go. Weasel. Just add me on Skype. Or that's my name in the forums as well. If you want to send me a message in the PokerVIP forums, that's also fine. So yeah, I hope you have good luck at the tables. I hope this helped you to identify some of your leaks. And you know where to find me if you have any questions.